Welcome to another episode of From the District with Senator Suzanne Weber. I am Adam Schwend, and I am joined, as always, with our illustrious Senator, Suzanne Weber. Suzanne, how are you? What's up?
Well, I'll tell you, I've had quite a week. It's been really interesting. We started out on Monday morning with a parking space that was too small.
We have pictures too. It's great.
It was great because the person who volunteered then to park my car could not get out of my car. So it was
advocating we send a staffer down there to videotape you crawling in the hatch. That's what I was advocating for.
Well,
nobody thought it was funny, but I did.
If someone hadn't, been able to leave before me, that's what I would have had to have done.
Yeah.
And when I stood there between the cars on both sides, my hips touched both cars. There was no way I could have gotten into those from either side.
Yikes. Well, those, I can attest, those Capitol parking spots are small. So when I was going to the Capitol, the great thing is it was COVID. There was nobody there. I had my pick of the spots.
Yeah.
It is not that way anymore.
Well, I had that problem in the other garage too. I had a huge post on one side and a huge pickup on the other, and it was the same thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Katie and Tony, for getting you a new place. Correct?
Yes. Well, they didn't get me a new place. What happened was one of the big rigs on one side of me got exchanged with someone with a small rig.
Oh, they moved somebody else. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the way it started. How else was your week? What all went on?
I had two committee meetings that went for over 3 hours apiece because of the issues that we had to talk about. One in education and then one in human services. And then we also had 3 days of education ways and means subcommittee. And in that, we spent a lot of time listening to more reports on Department Administration Services, Department of Education, State School Fund, and then we listened to all the health-related licensing boards, and we're going to continue that next week. So we did occupational therapy, speech therapy, and audiology and imaging. So we got to hear, what the board does, how quickly they do it, if they have difficulty with the investigations or not, and how they issue their license and the waiting period, and services that they provide. So it's really very interesting.
I think it's one thing that I guess I never thought of, because I've never staffed for anybody who's been on Ways and Means. You being on education Ways and Means doesn't mean you are just doing the budget and handling the budget for the state K through 12 or even state higher ed. For example, the mortuary board, that budget goes through you, because that's education that's going through. So I had never thought of that. So anything that has anything to do with education, whether it's K through 12 or college, or if it's trades or any sort of thing, licensing that's around that, goes through education Ways and Means.
And I'll tell you, the mortuary board and cemetery board report was extremely interesting.
Probably not something you've done a whole lot of thinking about in your time as a teacher.
Well, not as a teacher, but Tom was in charge of the cemetery out at Sacred Heart. And so he dealt with the cemetery board. But it's interesting, they all expressed that they were going to be facing increases in rent. Well, who's the landlord? The state of Oregon.
Well,
So, they're dealing with that. And most of these boards are sustained by the licensing fees that they get. And so they've only got maybe 2 or 3 people that work for them, and they share an investigator. And so it's pretty bare bones as to what kind of staff and facilities they need. And at this point in time, many of them are still working from home.
Right. Wow. So you have had a very busy week. Did you get to do anything fun? I mean, or you didn't just have to sit through meetings, but did you get to go to any receptions or any of the fun stuff that comes with the legislative session?
Unfortunately, I was in the 3-hour meeting while my staff was going to the one for the fair, the fairs, all of the fair boards.
Right, which is a bummer because I know how much fairs mean to you, how important those are to you, especially in your time working at the Tillamook County Fair.
Yes, but I did have fair board members come to me and make appointments. And I got to tell you that one of the most amazing ones was Henry Miller and another board member came, and finally she looked at me and she said, do you know Mark and Terry Weber? And I said, well, yes, that's my niece and my nephew. And she said, well, my granddaughter's married to Travis Weber. So small world.
Even in the halls of the Oregon Senate.
Yes.
It's a small world. Well, it is that time of year where and I'd love to say that it's gonna calm down, but
it's not.
Really, it's not. You have been having time on the floor of the Senate for 2 days a week. Most of that introducing new bills and
yes,
kind of doing
right. We're going to start having more days on the floor.
Right.
Okay, the time is going to be limited, but we're going to be doing it 4 days a week.
Right, and those times have to be limited because so many of you have committees. So any time that's blocked out to have all of you together on the floor, that's time that you can't have committees. And now in the beginning of the sessions, that's really where the committees are doing their work.
Mm-hmm.
As we get to the end of the session, the committees will have ended their work, and most of the work at that point is happening on the floor. But right now, the committees are doing the work. And
talking about Ways and Means education, we're going to start looking at the governor's budget in depth, and it's probably going to take us a month and a half to go through it from our point of view.
Right. Right. So and that's just yours. Just yours.
That's just education. Right.
Right.
That her budget is, I don't know if it's 3 inches thick, maybe.
Yeah. Right. Very small print, too.
Yes.
Very small print.
And we've also been hearing from a lot of people on a lot of analysis on the budget. So, now that it's been prepared, everybody is going over it with a fine-tooth comb.
Right. Right. And that's where we start hearing people noticing things and noticing what's there, noticing what's not there. And that's when folks can have those conversations.
Yes.
Well, you've had a busy week and you've got a busy one coming up. And one of the big things that we flagged for you is that one of your big bills is coming up, a bill that you have been working on for a while. That's really important to you. And that's Senate Bill 127, which would raise the exemption rate on the commercial activities tax or corporate activities tax.
Corporate activities tax.
Yeah,
to $5 million.
Yeah.
Right.
Right now, that exemption is if you bring in gross receipts of $1 million or less.
Right. And that's the word, gross receipt.
Right. Not profits.
Not profits.
It's you sell $1 million worth of things, which sounds like a lot, but when you're a grocery store or you're a local car dealership or you're a hardware store, you have really, really, really tiny margins, but you deal in volume. So $1 million goes really fast. So you're proposing you raise that from $1 million to $5 million. Anything under 5 million would be exempted. What spurred you to do that?
Well, first of all, when the cap tax was implemented, we started seeing that we were losing pharmacies. Okay. Then I was hearing from small medical providers, because their costs are very contained and limited to what they can charge. And so in different parts of Oregon, we were losing those small clinics and those small providers. Then I was hearing from people like furniture stores, who also don't have the margin that, and I didn't know this, that a lot of retailers have. And we were going to be losing furniture stores also, and appliance stores. And all of that starts to be the message that who we are hurting is not Macy's and not Home Depot. It's the small local person who is trying to make a living in a rural area.
Right.
And that's what, we're going to be losing. And not everyone can drive to a pharmacy. You can get it in the mail, but with the problems that we have with mail delivery at the present time, that could be a problem to someone with a condition that needs a medication that they can't get through their local pharmacy, or their, and that the burden that puts on small town America needs to be rectified so that we can, I'm not saying everybody needs to have massive profits, but I'm saying that everyone has to be, what we've gotten used to is the ability to have those things close enough that we can get them.
Right. Right. I know mail pharmacy sounds great, but I know when I need medication, it's usually for my kids, and it's usually I need it right now because somebody's sick. I can't wait a day or two or three to get medication. So I know Tillamook Pharmacy for me has always been a go-to, and all of our pharmacies around the district are so important. So yeah.
And when the doctor tells you, I don't know if Safeway or Fred Meyer's is going to have this, I want you to start taking it right now, but you may have to wait 3 or 4 days for them to get it in. Mm-hmm. That's life-threatening for some people.
Right. And some folks have asked, why 5 million? Why can't it be 10 million? Why couldn't it be 20 million? And then we had this conversation. And
yes, we did.
The reality is that there's going to be some pushback from our friends on the other side, because it will reduce some revenue that comes in from the commercial activities tax, from the cap tax, the grocery receipts tax, which is a sales tax. I mean, let's be honest, it's kind of
it is
backdoor sales tax.
A lot of people reflect it in the billing. As
yeah, they do. So it's the reality is that this is probably what we can get through. Hopefully there'll be some time that we can continue to look at this, and we can continue to see what this does to our businesses, and we can continue to have the conversations. But this is what we hope we can get through now.
Yes, and they got far more in this corporate activity tax than they had ever thought that they were going to get. We've heard that the $2 billion, bantered around. And yes, it does go for education. However, we have a lot of revenue that's going for education, and maybe we ought to look at that. Maybe we ought to look seriously at how we fund our schools.
Right. Well, something else I wanted to talk about a little bit is you are also sponsoring a number of constitutional amendments.
Yes, I am.
And it's interesting. A lot of people think a constitutional amendment, and they think going out and getting the signatures and making sure that we have enough and getting it on the ballot. And that is a way to get it onto the ballot in Oregon. You can collect a certain number of signatures and get it on the ballot. That is
right.
a way that citizens can do it, but the legislature can actually refer some, can refer these to the ballot as well, and say, we think that we should amend the Constitution, or we at least think that the people of Oregon should have a voice in this. Would you like to amend the Constitution? So the first one I want to talk about is HJR 10. So anytime you hear HJR, it means Senate Joint Resolution, or HJR, House Joint Resolution. Those are the resolutions that are used to forward constitutional amendments to the voters. So this one would bring about a redistricting commission,
right?
An independent redistricting commission. And I know last year, or I guess it was 2 years ago now, there was quite a fight over redistricting. It was a
big fight, and it was all political. It was all political motivated. It didn't look at the number of people who lived in a particular area as to the people. It looked at them as to their political party. And I think that it resulted in a lot of lines being drawn that were wonky. I mean, there's districts out there, when you look at their district lines, you can't believe that, it goes from the coast to the valley, or down or around. And just look at my district last time. I had half of Tillamook County, and it was unfortunate that the county did not stay together. I had Clatsop County. I had a sliver of Columbia County. I had a partial area of Washington County, and I had one household in Yamhill County. So is that the way that we should be looking at the districts when we've already got counties, we've got, all kinds of other districts? We should be looking at an independent group drawing those lines according to population, and not by what kind of political clout those lines can deal.
It was interesting, and I'm not the first one, or the 10th, or the 100th, or the 1,000th one to point this out, but the leader of this group, the legislative group that drew the lines this last time around, was at that point Representative Andrea Salinas, who drew a new congressional district, and
yes,
darn golly gee, she got elected to that district.
She got elected, yes. And when you looked at the plans that they had for Tillamook County, there was one plan that had Tillamook County in 3 districts, with Tillamook being the center of each one of those districts. So it depended upon what side of the street you were on in downtown Tillamook as to what district you were in.
And if you were in the southern one, you were in the same district as West Salem.
Yes.
It was insane. Absolutely insane. So there was a proposal to do this that was going to collect signatures, and it was, God's honest truth, it was the widest coalition I have ever seen, from Taxpayers Association of Oregon and a lot of the right-leaning business groups to the NAACP, League of Women Voters. I mean, it was just, I've never seen such a broad coalition. Everybody wanted this, except for some of the leaders in the legislature, unfortunately.
Yeah. Right.
And then COVID came. And while they were collecting their signatures, COVID came, made it very difficult to collect signatures, and unfortunately, they did not get over the finish line on that. Right. So this would create an independent redistricting commission.
Yes.
So in the future, that's what we would have. So that's a great one. That's a great one. Great idea. Then we have SJR. Wrong one. SJR 11, which would require that the Senate approve any reprieve, commutation, or pardon that the governor gives.
Yes.
We haven't, Governor Kotek has not been in office very long, so we don't know how she's going to approach this. But Governor Brown, when she was in office, commuted many, many sentences and put continued to freeze on the death penalty, and then it ended up commuting the death row, their death sentences at the end to life in prison.
Yes.
And those were originally put on hold by Governor Kitzhaber. So right now it is the prerogative of the executive to do this, and this bill would make it so that the Senate would have to confirm those decisions. Why that?
Well, I'm not a fan of the death penalty.
Mhm.
You know, in my beliefs, that's not necessarily something that we should use as a punishment. However, when all of these commutations and pardons were being issued, none of the victims' rights were being considered. And I think that that is wrong, because then, you know, these people being released or pardoned are victimizing the people who have been hurt initially again. And I feel that there needs to be more oversight as to those decisions. And I think that this is one avenue of making sure that there is oversight on commutations and pardons, especially.
You know, especially when Kitzhaber did this and then Brown continued it, my question has just always been, like, if you don't like the death penalty, let's have it out. Let's just get rid of it if we're going to do that.
Right.
Let's have the conversation, but let's give the people of the state of Oregon the opportunity to vote on whether they want to do that or not.
Right.
Not just give the power to one person that can just wipe it clean forever.
That's exactly my sentiment.
Yeah, that's I think that's a reasonable thing, and a lot of these, I think, folks will see a little bit of a continuing vein around checking the executive. I think over the last 3 years, especially, we've had an executive branch who has just kind of run amok in terms of emergencies, and pardons, and all this has just kind of acted as a monarch.
Right.
And a lot of these, I think, are addressing those. And speaking of, the next one is talking about giving the legislature, this would be HJR 13, giving the legislature the power to impeach the governor and other executive branch officials, so the Secretary of State, the Treasurer, the Attorney General. I think a lot of people are surprised, especially when we get emails. We get a lot of emails from people saying, impeach the governor.
Right. But you know what? We're the only state in the union that does not have the ability to impeach the governor. The only recall we have, the only recourse we have is recall.
Right.
And that's expensive. That's really time consuming. And it's also unnecessary if the legislature has, in fact, the ability to remove that person.
And I think it's also, quite honestly, I think it's more fair to the executive.
I think so too.
Because in a lot of situations, when you are in a recall, you have angry people if you're in that situation. But if the people's representatives are able to sit down, hear evidence, hear what happened, and be able to make a decision based on that evidence, tuning out more of the political or the anger or the frustration.
Well, look at the anger towards Governor Brown concerning a lot of the decisions that she made.
Right.
And, you know, being able to take this to the legislature and use that ability to impeach her could have taken a lot of the anger out of people, but it also could have buoyed some of the people who felt that it was imperative that she be gone.
Right. And it would have given everyone an opportunity, and maybe someone would have introduced articles of impeachment, and they failed.
Right.
Well, that's how it works. That's how it works. That's how the situation. That's what we do. And unfortunately, you just never had that opportunity.
Right.
And there may be a time, we had the situation when Governor Kitzhaber was governor the second time around, and the problem is his issues came out right after he was elected, and
Right.
Oregon says you can't begin a recall until that elected official has been in office for 6 months.
Exactly.
So in theory, Kitzhaber could have hung on for 6 whole months, had to have a recall situation go through. He could have had his office for solid another year.
Yes, he could have.
But he did the right thing, and we're glad he did the right thing. But he may not have. And then we have a governor that would be in a situation where, faced with what he was faced with, they refused to do the right thing. You would have no recourse. We would be stuck with that governor.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
I think,
so
again,
I think the ability to be able to impeach is extremely important.
Right. And I think, and this just goes to it's giving me an opportunity to tell everybody, please don't email and ask us to impeach the governor. We can't. Right. It is not.
Yes, we have gotten a lot of emails concerning that.
A lot of emails.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those folks who would like to impeach the governor, the thing to do is to write all your representatives and demand a hearing on HJR 13.
Yes.
That's what you can do. That is a real concrete thing that you can do. It's currently in the Senate Committee on Rules. So if you want to email the Rules Committee in the Senate and tell them, please have a hearing and a work session on HJR 13, that is a concrete thing you can do. Emailing the legislature and saying impeach the governor, that does nothing, because they can't. It is not in the Constitution.
Right.
One more.
You want to talk about one more?
I want to talk about one more. I know you got other stuff too, but I do want to talk one more. It is states of emergency, HJR 14. We lived under a perpetual state of emergency for about 3 years, and it just kept going and going and going. And the only people who could end the state of emergency were the governor herself, which she chose not to do,
right,
or the legislature, which, despite you having a bunch of votes that you tried to make happen,
it didn't happen, and it wouldn't happen. No matter how hard we tried.
So, SJR 14 is interesting. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, it is time limits on the authority of the governor to issue a state of emergency. Her time limits, or the governor's time limits, are 30 days. And then at the end of that 30 days, decisions need to be made. And what it would do is then it would, if there still needs to be a state of emergency, then that would go to the counties. And the counties could decide if they wanted to maintain the state of emergency. Because here's the thing. Here we had a huge earthquake in Turkey. You know, thousands of people died as a result. We have, you know, the possibility of a huge event here on the coast. That state of emergency may be over with in the valley and in Eastern Oregon, but on the coast, it may still be something that needs to be put into, effect, because we don't have the ability to get what we need in order to handle it. But the legislature also, in a situation like that, may not be able to be convened to make any kind of decisions about whether the state of emergency needs to be continued.
And that's one thing I think a lot of people have just, and this isn't just Oregon, it's a lot of other states, it's especially Congress. There's a lot of punting the responsibilities to the executive branch.
Yes.
And the purpose of a state of emergency a statewide state of emergency. The governor can declare a state of emergency for certain counties based on certain things.
Right.
But statewide state of emergency, the purpose of that is for the governor to be able to have certain powers until the legislature can convene.
Right.
And it may not be possible. Some decision may need to be made really quick. And
right.
if the legislature can't convene, then
it goes to the next level, which is the counties.
Right. So that's the purpose, is that after 30 days, the legislature should be able to convene.
Right.
At that point, the legislature should be able to convene and have the conversations of what do we need to do as the representatives of the people. The governor shouldn't be making these decisions on her own. She should not only should she not be able to, she shouldn't have the burden of having to do that. That's a remarkable burden on someone to do that.
It is.
And they shouldn't have that pressure or that power. And so if for some odd reason, as you said, the legislature is not able to convene after 30 days, certainly the county commissions can convene and decide whether that continues. It makes just so much more sense. Because that was what I think a lot of us got some pushback on, is that if we got rid of the state of emergency abilities, well, what if it was an emergency and the legislature couldn't convene?
Right.
Well, this fixes that problem. So
it does.
So those are some really interesting, constitutional amendments. I have no idea how many of these, if any of these, we will actually see.
I don't know how many of them and if, because it's not in my hands, or it's it's in rules and.
Mm-hmm. The Committee on Rules will have to vote,
yes,
and then send it to the House, and then it would have to go likely in the Committee on Rules in the House, and then the House will have to vote for it, and then the people would be able to vote for it. That's how it works. But it's all of these are very compelling ideas. I do hope that the legislative leaders will consider those.
Well, I hope that they can see the common sense part of it.
Right. And that's all about you. That's common sense.
Yeah.
You had more you wanted to talk about. Let's hear it.
Well, I just want to say that I went up to Astoria today.
You did?
Yes, I did, because they had the opening of the brand new jail.
Oh.
What a fine facility. And I compliment the people of Clatsop County. They passed a $20 million bond in order to take a building that had been abandoned by the youth authority and turn it into a first-class jail.
Awesome.
I know that sounds funny, but
I heard you. I thought I heard you for a second say, "What a fun facility." I think you said, "What a fine facility."
A first-class facility.
Yes, excellent.
Excellent. Really honoring the staff and the people that unfortunately are going to have to be interned there. But they came in at budget. They have a lot of what they're going to be doing is also addressing drug, alcohol, and mental health issues in that facility. And everything is clean and nice and safe, and it's going to make sure that our staff and the inmates are going to be both safe and secure in that facility. I was impressed, and I was also impressed at how many people came for the ribbon cutting. I'd say there were about 60 people there.
Wow.
And it was an opportunity to be able to eat jail food and see what it was like, because they had chocolate chip cookies. Who'd have thought?
Get myself incarcerated. Chocolate chip cookie.
No, it was really interesting that, to meet the folks that work for Clatsop County in law enforcement. And, they have a staff of about 90 people across all of the issues that they deal with. And our Tillamook County Sheriff was also there for the ribbon cutting, and that was nice to see. It's an impressive facility, and Sheriff Matt Phillips was very complimentary to everyone who was instrumental in making it happen, especially the voters for Clatsop County.
Awesome. Well, congratulations to Sheriff Phillips. Congratulations to all the people of Clatsop County. That is a big investment, and congratulations to everybody for doing that. Well, that's all I have, Senator. Anything else you want to chat about? You've got another busy week coming.
Oh, I do. I have a really busy week coming. And like I say, we're going to be having more floor time. And we've got a couple of really long bills that are going to have to be read. One's going to take about 2.5 hours. Another one is well over an hour. I have to tell people how important it is if you have any kind of an inclination to be able to testify and bring information concerning a bill to the committees. It is very impactful. I told you I had two committee meetings that were 3 hours long apiece this week, and a lot of it was because there was so much testimony regarding the bills that we were discussing. And there was a lot of virtual testimony, and there was also a lot of in-person testimony.
Yeah, I think that's one of the good things that really came out of COVID.
Yeah.
Was virtual testimony. You don't have to drive 2.5 hours from Astoria to give your 90 seconds of testimony.
And there was a gentleman who was able to testify from Texas. Imagine that. But what he did was he gave us a lot of information on the children of servicemen in schools being part of the, it's not Purple Heart, it's a Purple Word organization that helps kids in schools.
Right.
And we especially have so many Coast Guard children along the coast, and people from military bases in Washington that also are here in Oregon, and those kids need support.
Right. Well, excellent. It's going to be another fun-filled week at the Oregon Legislature. As we mentioned, Senator's going to have time on the floor more often this coming week. So it's probably going to clamp down on the number of times that she's going to be able to have for meetings. Know that if you're not meeting about a certain piece of legislation and you just want to meet with her about a project or about a concern that you have that doesn't involve legislation, she is very available for meetings outside of the legislative session. And she does not work from Salem. This time she works in the district, so she can always do as well. So if you 15 minutes isn't enough for you and you can't get to Salem, and it doesn't have to do with legislation, consider maybe waiting until the legislative session is over this summer, and that'll certainly give you more time if that's possible. Of course, if you do need to talk about legislation or you do need to talk a concept that you would like to see, by all means get an appointment. But certainly,
I had two concepts that were proposed to me today that make a lot of sense, and I was also on the phone with people who also had concerns about bills that were coming up.
Yeah.
So, and I'm encouraging them to register to testify because it's easy to do.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Senator. Well, we'll be right back here next week. Same Senator time, same Senator channel.
Yes.
And
Adam, I want to thank you for doing this.
Oh, I love doing this. This is the highlight of my week. It is. It is. We get so busy we don't actually get to talk.
I know.
It's actually fun to actually have conversations with you about some of this stuff. So.
And I apologize for Martin interjecting, but he just has come home and he's had a haircut and a bath and he looks beautiful.
Oh, we look forward to seeing him.
Yeah.
All right, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And everyone, we'll see you next week.
Okay, take care.